World Jam Global Radio. This is Clarity.
Okay, we're getting ready for another Issues Today special.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Well, first I want to welcome that I've got my numero uno sidekick, shotgun rider, my co-host back today. Dr. David Remay is going to be with us.
I didn't really care.
We've also got special guests,
All about survival.
Steve Kramer,
Or die.
Ilsa Bell,
Rivals. I was too young.
alongside Dinah Vargas, who was with us last week.
In the streets, there was
And we have a special guest speaker who'll be with us for the first part of the show,
on my feet. I was
Teresa James.
women. I had girls.
You guessed it, we're heading back to Albuquerque,
so sweet.
historic city.
The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to
Last week we looked at the features of police brutality
cope with this.
and the transparency issues
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
relating to the corrupt policing that takes place in that town, Albuquerque.
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
That show is still available on World Jam Global Radio Library. Go and check it out.
I paid for my crime.
But today's show
Already did.
is part 2.
Paid for my crime.
And we look at the impact that bad policing, corrupt policing
Did my time.
has had on that community and the people of Albuquerque.
I was a drug dealer.
We speak to victim and activist Teresa James.
I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story.
And once again, we welcome Dinah Vargas, as I've already said,
Admit,
and fellow activists in issues relating to homelessness,
and think it over.
Steve Kramer
The life I
and Ilsa Bial.
I was young and dumb. My
Stand by.
I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was
Just want to remind you that there is no Issues Today next week, bank holiday, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas.
things have changed.
We're taking a rest, we're taking some time out.
I'm a change.
But we got a show lined up for you today,
It ain't about being no gangster. Life is
and I do believe
at all.
it's time we head on to our
Trying to
guest.
cope with this living hell.
World Jam Global
Already
Radio.
did
This
my
is
time.
Clarity.
Right, first and foremost, I want to introduce you to my sidekick, my co-host, my numero uno. I miss him so much, and the show is just not a show without the irrepressible Dr. David Remay. Good evening, David.
Hello, Kervin from Connecticut, USA, 1:04 p.m. here. Sun bright, ocean blue, waves glittering like diamonds upon a sapphire carpet. Gorgeous. I hope it's as beautiful in London.
Wow, it's a bit wet in London, to be honest with you. It's very wet and not so cold. It's still very warm, but it's a little bit wet.
Oh, I see. Well, I heard about a pastor the other day who was middle-aged. He wasn't doing too good in his church, and he got an offer to go to a much bigger church where he'd make 5 times more money. But he liked the little church he was in, you see, so he had a big problem about leaving the community and the people he loved. On the other hand, his wife really thought well of that new salary and new prestige. So the president of the new church came to him and knocked at the door and said to his son when he answered, "Has your father made a decision yet? We're waiting." And the boy says, "I don't know for sure. My father is upstairs praying about that job, and my mother is downstairs packing." So that's life, you know. You've got to come together sooner or later. And in America, it seems like we're having a very difficult time coming together. President Obama went out on his voyage to Hawaii, where he was born, contrary to the birthers' views that he was not born in America. In fact, he was born in the United States of America, the 50th state. And Ted Cruz, who, along with Trump, doubted the president's citizenship, was actually born in Canada and remains a dual citizen. So that's a very interesting hypocrisy that blooms like summer mushrooms in a garden that are unwanted. But anyway, the president, on his way to Hawaii, stopped off in San Bernardino and visited with the families of that horrendous murder that cost the death of 14 people and wounded over 20. Now, of course, that's not the worst terrorism in America. Don't forget Dylan Roof, who went into a black church in Charleston and shot 9 people praying and studying the Bible dead. Don't forget the over 45 children who died in Newtown, Connecticut, right here a few minutes from where I live. Don't forget all the other victims in Virginia Tech and in Chicago, and the hundreds and thousands of murders that die from victims of outrageous gun laws in this country. But the only terrorism that seems to be attractive to the NRA and the Republicans in this country is terrorism committed by somebody who happens to be practicing Islam, which is a joke because the most murders and terrorism in the United States of America are the result of white male Christians who have guns legally. Now, the next thing on the list is that the Sanders camp has recovered its list to from the DNC after they found out some staffers from Bernie Sanders, who I like, he's from a neighboring state, took advantage of an access to Hillary Clinton's list without her permission. Now, he did fire the staffer who was responsible for that, but he seems to think that there's no accountability for it. There has to be accountability. As we used to say, I'm going to punish you and God can forgive you. And that's the way it is here. So it's not fair to cheat, and he acknowledges that, and he's a good man. And I'm glad to see that at tonight's debate, I hope that issue is a settled issue. Yeah. But Bernie does have a tendency to get self-righteous on occasion. We also heard from the Jerusalem Post this week, like we really need to hear it, that Adolf Hitler, in fact, only had one testicle. Well, I'm not really concerned about him having one testicle. What concerns me is that he had one brain that was so totally warped and dysfunctional that it should have been castrated from his head. Now, next thing is, Putin is going to increase the military force he's using in Syria against ISIS. And I can honestly say, for the first time in my life, I'm going to admit that I could be less than right. Notice I didn't say wrong. Less than right in that Putin may have had it right all along in going into Syria with his forces to put an end to this ISIS, since the capitalist arms merchants of the United States and Western Europe have no interest in seeing peace in the Middle East at any cost, and the Mossad certainly doesn't want to see Assad replaced, and then they'd have to deal with the democratic government in Syria, which would make them deal with the Golan Heights, from which they're stealing water and oil at the very moment. Let me say that Bill Cosby is still up the creek without a paddle for what he's done to all these women. It's a shame. It's a grotesque shame. It's a perversion of his penis, and he ought to be disciplined for it. And I understand his wife has just been subpoenaed, and that's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to him when it's revealed to her all the grotesque things he's done. And finally, I want to end that Obama has just vetoed 2 bills passed by the Congress to interfere with repairing the environmental damage committed by those fossil fuel addicted capitalist freaks who do not want to care about our environment, do not want to protect our world, and who have no interest whatsoever in doing the things necessary to cure the problem that they and their greed for profit has created. And finally, I want to say that President Carter has come out, and he is a great American. He's probably the least understood and most underestimated American president in modern history, has come out and once again called the ace an ace and said that George W. Bush bombing Iraq was a total mistake. The war was a mistake. And of course, I said this in 2002, 7 months before we ever went into that war. So that's the situation in the United States of America today, not to mention the fact that we're going to talk about all this police brutality and all the threats to the police not to enforce the law because they're being mistreated. Well, let me tell you something. We'd have to mistreat the police 1 million times more than they're being mistreated to cover up all the kind of vandalistic, Gothic, Neolithic, primordial, Neanderthal, primitive KKK crimes that they have committed upon the minorities, the poor, underprivileged, and people in this country who doesn't have a rich lawyer to come up with a defense called the affluenza disease, which happened in Texas when a boy got drunk, 15 years old, ran over and killed people, and he got off because the judge believed that he had the affluenza disease, which means he was brought up wealthy and privileged and never been told what was right and wrong, and therefore he couldn't be held responsible. If that's not a lollipop that would melt in the daylight sun, I've never heard of one. So thank you for having me back, Kervin. I welcome our wonderful guests, Ilsa, Diana, and Stephen, and I look forward to a powerful meeting and earth-shattering, changing show.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, we missed you last week, but you sure made up for it today, David. Welcome back, Dr. David Ramey, and we're going to be hearing some more from him very shortly. Now let's move on to some of the guests that we've got on the show. Dinah Vargas was with us last week, and she will be participating in the show, even if it's just a fleeting in and a fleeting out. Evening, Dinah.
Hi there, how are you?
We're great, great to have you back on the show again.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we know a little bit about Dana, but you can just remind them, refresh them of who you are and what you do very quickly.
Well, my name is Dinah Vargas. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. And we started a small grassroots media forum just to counter the nonsense that actually passes as news and create a forum for the voice of the people. And through that, we started working with the unsheltered here in Albuquerque and trying to one, systemically change things, and two, occupying with them in complete protest of our actual local government here in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow, thank you very much. And having listened to the show again from last week, what a powerful show and input and contribution that was. Thank you very much, Dinah. We also have two new guests who support Dinah in her work out there in Albuquerque. And I think we'll start with Steve first. Steve Kramer.
Good day, Kervin. How are you?
I'm great, mate, and it's fantastic having you on the show. We haven't quite met yet, but we have had a bit of a brief conversation. Would you like to just introduce yourself to our audience, tell them a little about yourself, what you do, and what you're about in Albuquerque?
Sure. My name is Steve Kramer, and I'm also from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And like you mentioned, I work with Dinah on Burkey Media, as well as work with a handful of other people, including Ilsa, whom we'll meet here in just a minute. And we organize and sort of work around the police brutality issues and the issues the non-housed face and the criminalization of the homeless and the non-housed. And then we sort of create housing proposals trying to increase the law.
Okay, you there? Hey, Steve? Are you there, Dr. David? Hello? What are we losing? Is everybody there? I'm going to drop the call and bring it back in again. Okay. Let's do that again, shall we? Hello, who's there?
It's
David.
Steve and Elsa again. We must have lost contact.
Yeah, we did. David,
Yeah.
are you there?
I'm here. Hello, Steve.
Teresa, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I'm
sorry. The line went dead. Something happened, but we'll carry on. Steve, you carry on, mate.
Okay, could you just tell me where we broke off?
Just do it from the top, my friend.
All
No,
right. Yeah.
you're at housing. You were speaking about you're doing housing projects.
Yeah, well, we're actually proposing, a variety of different models to try to increase the housing stock that does exist. Because, from a philosophical point of view, it seems like our city is on board with heading home. But, without available units, there's no way to bring that into actual reality.
Okay. Alongside, we have Ilsa Biel. Did I pronounce it right, Ilsa?
Sort of, but I don't really care. It's Ilse Biel.
Oh,
Hi,
Ilsa
Kevin.
Biel. That's good. Hi, Ilsa. And apart from having a great night out supporting the homeless last night, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and your involvement, please.
Yeah, I'm living in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the moment. I'm originally from South Africa. I'm Afrikaans. I've been an activist for a very long time, but something that became quite important to all of us, I think, is that we need to move away from just sheer activism, standing on a corner and yelling at people, but also start working on advocacy. So we've started working a lot on policy change, trying to change policy, and that has actually been rather rewarding.
Okay, that sounds absolutely beautiful, and I think both myself and Dr. David are going to want to dig into that as the show progresses.
Ilsa, what town in South Africa are you from?
I was born in Johannesburg, but
Yes.
my favorite spot, and I encourage anyone who can go to South Africa, visit Durban.
Okay.
So I've been to Durban.
Nice one.
I've been to Durban. I've been to Cape Town. I've been all over there. Nice country, beautiful country.
Yep.
Well, no doubt we can do all the catching up on what you miss and what you don't miss in South Africa very shortly.
I would like to say that I think the United States and Europe and certainly Israel have so much to learn from the way South Africa, once the ANC took charge from the apartheid government, operated. And Bishop Tutu set up the councils to get forgiveness and move on.
The reconciliation.
We have the whole world has so much to learn from Tutu Mandela and the ANC. And I have said to Kervin many times, though I'm a white Jewish man, I have no example in the history of the world except with the black people of our world for forgiveness. It seems like the black people in Africa and America have an amazing ability to forgive those who have done them so much wrong. And if we could forget the music and basketball and the art and the literature, if we could just take the heart of the black man and woman and their ability to forgive those who have done them harm, and to become the cursed instead of the cursor, we would be far better off in this world.
Amen to that, Dr. David. Finally,
Can I jump in there? Sorry, I can't let that go.
Okay.
I agree with you, David, but a friend of mine, quite an amazing guy in South Africa, Ketan Lakani, once told me that we've always got to remember that a revolution is not just the first 180 degrees of breaking down a system, but also the subsequent 180 degrees to build up something new.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, right now, I cannot agree with what the ANC is doing, even though I did fight for them to come into power.
I hear that, and I think there's
I defer to you on that. I haven't followed those politics since Mandela, but I will say that the 360 image you point out is quite beautiful, and the circle in ancient Greek is the perfect symbol. So I think you're probably right. We need to complete the circle.
Absolutely. Finally, our final guest that we're going to have, and our first speaker of the night, is someone who refers to herself as a victim and an activist. Welcome, Teresa James.
Hi, how are you all?
We're great.
Hello.
It is an absolute honor
Hi.
and privilege to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you all, especially Dinah, Steve, and Elsa. who are doing such wonderful work in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Solidarity.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Teresa.
Well, let's see.
And then you can lead straight into how you became a victim before you became an
Okay.
activist.
Okay. Well, I love your beautiful discussion about Africa, having been married to a man that's from Kenya,
Wow.
and watching what's going on with the president of Kenya, who's holding people there responsible if they cause any corruption. So I just wanted to say that, people from Africa do have beautiful hearts. I don't necessarily call myself a victim, really, because that sort of a word, when you start calling yourself a victim, gives you excuses for so many things. I think that I'm more of a survivor, and like Elsa had mentioned, I'm trying to be on that other 180 degrees of going onwards and upwards and trying to heal. So, and it's I'm still in my 8th year of healing now. So.
Okay, tell us how your story began, Teresa.
Well, unfortunately, actually, I'll go back to 2006 when my loved one, Jay Murphy, was beat up by the police. And when I say beat up, they smashed the windows on his truck that he was sitting in, pulled him out of the truck, drug him up and down the street. And there's probably like 5 cops from the Southeast substation in Albuquerque, and beat the hell out of him. I tried to complain about it. I did put in a complaint. The next year, he had purchased a home in the Kirtland Neighborhood Edition in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This neighborhood had been being harassed by the police department. And when I say that, I mean they were walking through the neighborhood like a bunch of soldiers and harassing people. Anyway, so Jay had purchased this home, and the risk management was coming in and stealing people's homes and selling them to make money. This was with APD and risk management, and then a realtor who was working with APD. So Jay put in a complaint about that, or was starting a lawsuit with NAACP after they took his home. So when he got his home back, and something happened at the home, I guess there was a pre-planned SWAT situation, and they killed him. So I don't know if, and in the midst of them killing him, they also almost shot my daughter.
Teresa, did your husband, did he have any history with the police, criminal
No.
past, or?
Well, let me describe Jay Murphy to you. Jay Murphy and I went to school together in 1983. He was at West Mesa High School. He was the most popular boy in the high school. He was a state champion wrestler. He was a black belt. He worked. He was friends even with the APD cop even after he got out of high school. He taught children karate at the dojo, of which one of the judges, Judge Jewell, also participated at that dojo. And Jay worked at West Mesa High School, of which he was an assistant to the assistant principal. So he was working security there and helping kids and counseling them. He was the sort of person who would break up fights. He was the sort of person that would help. He was a person who loved my 2 older kids so much. I
can hear the pain in your voice.
Yeah.
What prompted the police to approach him in the first place?
Long story. Jay?
Take your time.
That's a very good question. I mean, I know that Jay had a lot of pain in his heart. He lost a baby, and I know that can't be an excuse, but I know that Jay, I don't know. In 2006, when I put that complaint in, we were just targeted. It's good to tell people to put in complaints about the police, but once they get a hold of that, they know who to target.
So what you're trying to say to us really is you had this incident where he went on. You put in a complaint, and from that complaint, you then started to get harassed.
Well, yes. I mean, there was harassment already going on in the neighborhood, but I mean, the police had come to the house. They busted into the house when my 2 kids were in there, and my son's girlfriend. They called mommy, me, to go over to the house. This was prior to him being killed. I come there. They're taking everybody to the house. They have a little girl, 17 years old, on her knees with her hands on her head with a rifle pointed at her. They have pointed rifles at my children.
What for? What was their? What could they possibly suggest was their reason? Their cause for coming into your home,
looking for drugs or whatever, or things like that.
But was it, again? I'll ask the question: was there any history of drugs or drug-related offences within your home?
Well, no. Jay did not have drug-related offenses. Jay was using drugs in order to be able to deal with his realities of life, of which a lot of people do. But still, that's not a crime. He wasn't going out and killing people. He wasn't raping people. He wasn't stealing things. I mean, he had his own money. I helped take care of his finances. There was absolutely no reason for them having gone to the house to do that. They came in to just try to take the house. They were in that neighborhood. They were taking many people's houses. There was a lawsuit done by Paul Kennedy in 2009, which was a class action lawsuit for this neighborhood because the police were coming in and taking people's homes illegally and reselling them. And
I'm lost for that one. What right would the police have to take someone's home? How does that work?
How does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? I mean, what did they do?
They
take it to
come
court?
into the house. Jay had just purchased a home, in 2006, meaning that it had been inspected. When you buy a home, that people go in and inspect it and say it's okay. So they come in March and go into the house and red tag it because they say this is wrong and that is wrong and this is wrong and that is wrong. Okay. So then Jay had to beg for his house back. He had to go to the mayor. He had to go to Pete Dinelli, who is the head of the risk management, thing. They were trying to take his home. They said, if you do not fix your home by this amount of days, then we're going to take your house. And they were doing this to many people in that neighborhood.
Okay, and then what they would do with the property thereafter was that they just put it up for sale and sell it to somebody else. And what happened with the money that they raised after selling someone else's house?
That I do not know. We can ask Paul Kennedy because Paul Kennedy created a lawsuit about that, and I did not read it. I was just simply appalled because Jay's uncle is Joe Louis Murphy, who actually trained Bobby Foster back in the day. But anyway, Joe Louis Murphy was a vice president of NAACP here in Albuquerque, and he is the one who was creating a lawsuit with Jay to sue the city of Albuquerque for what they were doing to the people in that neighborhood.
Tell me how Jay lost his life.
All right, how he lost his life. So Jay was in his house. Actually, he had been out in front of his house because I guess the neighbors across the street were trying to fight with him. There was like 4 people against him. He called my son to come home because my son was out riding his 4-wheeler. So Jay goes back in the house. I believe that this was a planned incident, meaning because I took all my papers. I took it to a captain of a Las Cruces police officer, and he said that this was a planned SWAT. This was a training by Chief Schultz for all the departments of police in Albuquerque because all the departments of police in Albuquerque showed up at the call. It took them 1 hour to kill Jay from the time of the call. So there was BCSO there was SWAT, there was AFD, there was even a lady from CYFD there. The chief of police was there. So anyway, my son comes home and tells the police, leave my dad alone. He's harmless. He's in the house. He had been doing drugs, so he had the mindset of a 2-year-old. He was in the house. My daughter did not want to go outside the house, and my daughter said, because you guys are going to hurt my daddy, I do not want to go outside. So my daughter was upstairs in the bedroom with her dad. there was a officer named Russell Carter, who was a canine, who went upstairs in the house next door with a AFD, without the permission of any of the supervisors that were there. Supervisors meaning there was captains there, Chief Schultz was there, there were detectives there, and sergeants there. There was over 50 police officers there. They had there was even an ambulance before all these cops got there. So the canine, Russell Carter, and back during this time, this was in 2007, they were actually giving cops bonuses for shooting people. And they would give them a few days off. So shooting people was nothing to them. And so finally, I believe it was Mike Gomez who was able to bring that out, and they may have stopped doing that. But anyway, so Russell Carter said, I'm going to call an assault. This is what he did. He said, assault. He stated that Jay, who would never, ever harm his children in his lifetime, was going to hurt his daughter. In the meantime, Russell Carter shoots into the house. My daughter's walking down the stairs to go get a glass of water for her dad and sees a bullet fly in front of her face. The bullet that Russell Carter shot at Jay, trying to hit Jay, went through the wall of the bedroom. My daughter's walking down the stairs. Bullet goes in front of her. My daughter goes down the stairs, opens the front door for whatever reason. The cops come in, put their boot on her head, and instead of treating like her, like a hostage, which they tried to call her, they put their boots on her head, put her in that little white outfit, put her in handcuffs, and drag her downtown along with my son. Oh, my son, meanwhile, is in the police car with his handcuffs, with the windows rolled up in 80-degree weather. Has to listen to all this going on with his dad. So,
let me jump in here.
All right.
Let's. I want to talk about something here, and Steve Kramer may want to add too, in terms of the Albuquerque, New Mexico Police Department being extraordinarily reticent and unwilling to cooperate with the laws that exist in the state of New Mexico in revealing evidence that the public should be able to review, not only because police are public servants, they're here to serve and protect and not to rule and control. It seems to me that Albuquerque has a problem. I know that the New York Times reviewed the Justice Department review of Albuquerque's police and found that in 20 deaths between 2013 and now, the police have used excessive force and unnecessary force. And then in hundreds of cases of non-fatal shootings, they have used force that was absolutely excessive by the officers, and that there was no threat to the officers whatsoever when they chose to discharge their weapons. Now, having said this and preparing for this show, I have been convinced that one of the problems we have with police in the United States, and I'd like both of you to address this, especially because, Teresa, you are a first-hand witness and one who has experienced this level of violence by the police. What level of violence do you think is in response to what we call the Law Enforcement Exchange Program, which brings together 700,000 law enforcement officers in the United States with the Israeli occupation forces and army? I know for a fact that many in the Albuquerque Police Department, including a recently promoted major, have been trained by the Israel Security Agency Shin Bet and the Israel National Police, the Ministry of Internal Security. Now, I know that American police exchange knowledge and techniques and tactics and strategy with many police departments in the world. But we also know from these Palestinian deaths and the horrible violence in Israel, the results of death and shooting, people who may or may not be weaponized at the moment of their killing, that the American police forces have become militarized. We have been giving military weaponry and armor in excessive vehicles. They're dressed like military people. In fact, I've been to Israel. I'm Jewish, and I have seen the forces, and they are totally militarized. And I think if you look at television now in San Bernardino and other cases, I don't know the difference between the Army and police anymore. I used to know. I could look at Sheriff Andy Taylor on Mayberry RFD and know he was a law enforcement officer and he was not a member of the military. But we have gotten away from that. So I would like to ask you, how do you intend to gain some type of oversight in terms of your local community law enforcement's training and tactics and results, as long as we outsource the training of these officers to militaristic regimes that use excessive violence? And how do you intend to demilitarize the forces? One-on-one is not going to work. How do you intend as a community, and Ilsa, you may have something to say about this, how do you come together as a community to force a change in the policymakers in your government?
David, that's a really difficult question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. I think if we take a page out of the book that the veteran activists have written about getting DOJ to come and look at the situation here in Albuquerque, can basically be summed up in 2 words: patience and persistence. It took a long time, but eventually DOJ did arrive. That's not the magic bullet, sorry to use that word, but at least there is now some sort of light that has been cast on this issue. There's a big problem with transparency, or the lack of transparency. For instance, you mentioned about officers being trained in Israel, and also not necessarily in Israel, but by the IDF. Sue Squirman, who's the coordinator of the local Peace and Justice Center, has been writing to the office of the mayor of Albuquerque to find out what the names of the officers are who had been trained by IDF. And we know that there are officers. There have been previous attempts at applying for public records in this case, and there's just been a stalemate. The authorities are not being transparent. They're trying to block any of these requests. Sue got a very non-committal answer back initially, pushed further, and she just didn't receive any answer. She's now written to the mayor again, and we're hoping that she will get a response. But even where the IPRA requests are concerned, there's a huge, big problem with this is supposed to be a citizen right, and it's just not being honored by the authorities. So to answer your question about what are we going to do?
Oh, wait, let me jump in.
Hang on a minute, David. Let her finish, David.
I just want to ask a question that follows before she jumps. I saw that the chaplain, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I saw that the chaplain of the Albuquerque Police Department is a rabbi named Frick or something of this nature. Have you thought about going through that, the rabbi, and putting pressure on him? He doesn't want to be in the newspaper. I asked the chaplain of the Albuquerque Police Department, I don't know what a police department is doing with a chaplain, but asked the chaplain of the police department, is Israel involved in training your officers? Put it on him. Write a letter to the paper. Get it going. Flash it up.
Okay, it almost sounds as if you think that we're not doing anything. We are, but we are also working on various aspects, and we're trying to see some common ground amongst these various problems, and one of the commonalities would certainly be the lack of transparency. So yes, we can go to different routes. We didn't think in terms of going to the chaplain. That's a good idea, and we'll try that. But then also, if you think about it, if there are structures built into place, like the Freedom of Information Act, called IPRA in New Mexico, then surely we need to insist that the authorities then honor those rights. Yeah. And by then trying to find other ways of doing it, yes, we can do that as an adjunct. But my personal opinion is, if there is a route that is already established and given to the people, if the people do not use that route, they are going to lose it. And that is why we continue to insist that the IPRA requests be honored. Mm-hmm. And that is also why we try and continue along that way. Yes, we'll put pressure on from additional directions, but we have to keep the authorities accountable to honor what is supposed to be honored.
You know, I have great difficulty with this because we operate totally different here in the UK. And I sit down here, and that's why I often let Dr. David lead, simply because he has so much more knowledge in the things pertaining to law, as that's his area of expertise, prosecutorial misconduct. So his area of law is absolutely superb and second to none, and far above anything that I can imagine or drum up. But I struggle when I hear people like yourself, and I'm speaking to you in particular, Ilse, talking about using avenues that are made possible and accessible for the general public to use in order to make their complaints and their requests known. And yet they're still hitting brick walls and stumbling blocks, which are totally inappropriate, and give them no leeway, no room to argue or to get redress in any way whatsoever. And I'm struggling to find out how on earth this all goes on, and nobody in any area of authority, because over here in the UK, for example, you've got the Police Complaints Commission, you have the Ombudsman, you have various other, the Press Complaints, you have all of these other areas where you can take your complaints to, which force people in authority and power to listen. So it's not that I disbelieve, because I don't disbelieve. I'm posting this stuff up on my wall daily. I can see the battle that you guys are having, but it must be absolutely deflating. And when you take it back to somebody like Teresa, who's actually got a live case, in her own life that she's having to be an advocate for, and especially having to protect and look after her children in that process. It's got to be another way. There's got to be some way where you guys can pull together the resources that all the activists, whether they're shipping off into different directions or what, I don't know. I don't even know where this is going, because for me, again, as I said, in the UK, we operate totally differently. But I just cannot fathom, I cannot understand, I cannot comprehend that you guys could be going through so much and be getting so little back. Right. And I suppose I want to throw a question in to Teresa before you guys continue with this particular line, is because with all of what you went through, Teresa, it must be very, very painful for you to have to come through that and support your children through that. How did you manage to deal with the pain of what you went through, and did you find support from fellow activists in trying to get what you were doing up and running so you can battle what it was that you were battling with a live on case?
Thank you for asking me that question. I actually thought about that this morning when I was out running, and even yesterday. I think the worst part of losing a parent for your children is the pain of your children, because there is nothing that you can do to take that pain away. And the very first night that Jade died, that was the very first night when I heard my son, he was 19 years old at the time, cry since he was a baby. And and the anger that came out of him. And there was nothing that I could do to take that pain away. And there's still nothing that I can do. And all I can do is encourage. And thank goodness that my children are doing so well. I mean, they're succeeding. They're surviving in their lives. And I pray to God and thank God, that they are.
Teresa, was your husband, I'm sorry to ask this, but was your husband a Christian or a Kenyan Muslim?
Okay, so my husband that I married after Jay, there was Jay, and he was my boyfriend I knew him for 25 years, and then I married John after that. John was the Kenyan. But Jay, his daddy was Jehovah's Witness, and their family was Jehovah's Witness. Jay didn't really practice that. He was just himself or whatever. But I know that he believed in God. He believed in Jehovah. So.
Okay. Well, I only ask because there's some reports that these officers who have been trained, as Ilsa pointed out, either by the Israeli forces in America or are in Israel. I mean, she's pointing out they could be trained in either place. A lot of them do have a certain type of newly gained animosity toward Muslims. No, I'd say religious Muslims. I wouldn't say racial, because if you've been to Israel, you'll see many Israelis look just like Palestinians. It's hard to distinguish. In fact, some of the radical Israelis are stabbing their fellow Jews because they look Palestinian. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just need to establish that fact.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is back in 2007, so this is back prior to what's even going on right now. However, I would point out, and I can quote my children in hearing the police officers say, "Yay, we shot another black man." So there was a rape, and Jay was half African American. So that was part of our lawsuit, was their maybe some hatred towards people who are of racial. So, but as far as the officers training in Israel, and Dr. David had mentioned that there was one officer, a major, I guess, from APD that's training in Israel, and that that police officers are militarized. In some way, that militarization is needed in a way, but it doesn't have to be used all the time. It is not necessary to go out dressed like a soldier all the time. There's no reason for it. Yes, there's a reason for it if we get invaded by quote-unquote ISIS or something like that. That I can see them using their little vehicles, but using it on people is ridiculous.
Hang on, one minute, David. Before we bring in Steve and Ilsa, I just want to ask you one more question before we move on, Teresa, because I do know, by the way, David, Teresa won't be staying for the whole show. She has asked to be excused. Oh, okay. So I'm just trying to get as much out of her as I can before she leaves. Go ahead. We're going to run with Steve and Ilsa afterwards. Yeah. How did this whole experience affect your children?
My son had to deal with a lot of anger. And now he's in a better place. He has he has a baby now, and a girlfriend and a baby on the way, and he's succeeding at his job now. But it took a lot of time. I mean, it's been 8 years. With my daughter, the one that was in the house, they dragged my children down to the police station, didn't even tell them that their dad was dead till after they interviewed them. My daughter, she's so very strong. She's probably the strongest young lady I've ever seen in my whole life. She goes to work. She takes care of her 2 children. One of these days when she is ready, then we will go talk to someone about what happened, because she still hasn't brought that out. But every day I pray, and I have my children in my heart, because they're, for me to be hurting on the inside, they're probably hurting 100 times more.
One more question. Yeah. How do they view the police now? What is their opinion of law enforcement on the whole?
Our opinion of law enforcement, if you really want to tell the truth, there is not very much respect for it. I mean, nowadays in this day of Facebook and where you can see it, something that happens even yesterday, where these officers just go and just are lying on this guy. Oh, if you move, we're going to shoot you. And then they shoot him, and you see that. You saw the James Boyd shooting. There is not a high opinion of police officers. We call them murderers. The media keeps going from one extreme of, yes, police officers are so great. Oh, look at what these police officers are doing. I mean, we do not have a high opinion. They hurt our family. Nobody has ever told us we are sorry for what happened. And you're talking about, did I get any help when this happened in 2007? No, I did not. The only help that I got was a little card that was put on the fence when Jay was killed that said, I am sorry for your loss. I did not have anybody. I went to the head of Cop Watch, the head of Answer, and Mr. Andres Valdez, who runs an organization and tried to start help or has tried to start protesting.
Teresa, let me ask you, how do you feel when you see a man like Donald Trump and other Republicans in particular jump on the radio and television with a bunch of policemen behind them and say, I demand a national death penalty for anyone who shoots a policeman under any circumstance? Yet not at all mention all the hundreds of victims who are innocent and shot dead by police to whom they offer no threat whatsoever. How do you feel when you see the forces in our country and the political powers in our country only care about those men in uniform?
Yeah, as shown by the occurrence of what happened with their governor last night, and then there's also occurrences where police are getting in trouble, which proves that just because you have this title on yourself of being a governor or a police officer, it does not make you a good person. I think death penalty for all police officers, I think it should go both ways. I think that when someone is killed by a police officer, I think that police officer needs to go through a grand jury process, and let's see what happened in that incident, because not all police officers are good and not all police officers are innocent, just like all the other people in this world that are civilian are not all good and not all innocent. Absolutely. So that's what I think about it. I think it's wrong putting these people on a pedestal. They don't belong that way. The only one that belongs on a pedestal is God.
Absolutely. Ilsa.
Yeah.
Hi, Ilsa.
Hey.
You've had to stand in the background and listen to Teresa give an account of her emotional state as it stands right now. But I would imagine that in your work, you've had to come alongside not just the Teresas, but many others who have been survivors of this brutality that you advocate against.
Yeah, and it's of course really difficult to hear those stories, and especially as we now heard in Teresa's voice, hear that pain that just persists, and the anger and, in a sense, the hopelessness, because powerlessness, because what are you going to do, because you're fighting the whole system. But I hope I'm not stepping on your toes and so on, but I do want to complicate the issue a little bit.
Okay.
In the work that we're doing at the moment with the unhoused people, we've also become very aware of the unfair burden that is placed upon the officers, where they are expected to fill the gap, be the first responders, deal with issues that society at large, the structures at large, should be dealing with. So, for instance, if someone is having some sort of psychotic break, they have to jump in and deal with that.
You're not stepping on my toes. Let's go there. Let's go there.
But it's not to make excuses for then the violence. If we take the incident that Teresa has now also mentioned, and that went viral internationally, the case of Abba Boyd's murder, and it was murder. The whole society actually carries the burden of blame there. The whole situation started with Abba Boyd not wanting to go into a shelter, having no other alternative, then went, quote unquote, illegally camping. Some well-to-do, very well-heeled neighbor being affronted by his presence, calling in 911, and then the whole drama just took its course. So it wasn't just the cops. The cops were completely wrong, and they frequently are in these cases. But it's just that society can't just put the blame on the officers.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but let me run this by you, because I'm not in total agreement with you there, and I'll tell you why. If I'm Joe Bloggs and I'm a local citizen, I have this house and I own this land, and I see somebody that I would prefer not to see on my property, so I call 911. I am not responsible for the way that officer approaches and deals with the issue. Right, and for me, right, I do believe that there is no training in law enforcement to deal with people that have mental health related issues, and a lot of people, a lot of the homeless and the vulnerable, they have issues either relating to drugs or alcohol dependency, which also has an additional mental health state attached to it, and the way that could be handled is far different in this country than it is in the USA. So if somebody called the police because a homeless man was urinating up against his car or his wall, or they called the police because a homeless man was camped out in his garden, or they found him sleeping in the back of his truck, or for anything whatsoever, the way that the police would approach this would be totally different to the militarized, neotheatrical way that the police respond to it in the USA. And that you cannot blame on the society or the local community. That is just a lack of training and a lack of resources put in to deal with particular issues that affect a community that is no different to anywhere else in the world. David, where are you?
Yes, Kervin, I would like to jump in here a second if I can.
Come in there, my friend.
So I can understand what you're saying, but you have to understand at the end of the day, who is responsible then? We're supposedly have a representational form of government. So I believe that Ilse's point is, as a society, we haven't applied the pressures in the proper places. We haven't taken our sort of responsibility serious in the fact that we don't hold our representational government accountable. And then, so yes, when we do say, it's not your fault, it's not your responsibility as to how the police respond. Well, yeah, it is, because if it's not our responsibility, then whose is it? Because at the end of the day, we're the only gatekeepers left. Yeah. So I agree 100% with what you're saying. And in fact, your examples sort of highlight our point, is that you say it's handled totally different there in the UK. But why is that? It's because you guys have demanded it. It's not because it's
absolutely. And again, I've reiterated that on several shows that we've done, as Dr. David will testify. We have crime intervention, crisis intervention. We have a crisis team. We have a mental health team, and we have mental health teams for different types of mental health. So therefore, if somebody's experiencing or exhibiting a psychotic or schizophrenia or paranoid behavior, then a team expert in that area will be sent out. If it's depression, and like a team expert in that area will be sent out, and the police themselves are given that in additional training. Now, I've been a homeless worker. I have my own homeless charity, but I've also been a homeless worker for many years, and I worked with the Salvation Army for 3.5 years, and not just working in the hostel, but having to do my NVQ in health and social care, and being sent away for various types of training in understanding mental health, alcohol dependency, and I had to have all of these things in place before I could move from my position of just a project worker to senior project worker, right? And once I had that qualification, I'm now able to do risk assessments. Where is the risk assessment in any of these arrests that are taking place, when these police officers are turning up, and the first thing that you're seeing on all of these videos that we're watching is their hand on their gun? First thing. The moment you pull out the gun, you've got nothing else to go to.
Let me ask Teresa before she goes quickly. Teresa, have you, sorry, Steve, I have a lot for you and Ilsa later. Teresa, let me ask you, have you had any contact with the, I don't know if you call it a state's attorney or district attorney in your county and city of Albuquerque? I guess as a county district attorney. Have you any contact with him? Have you brought charges? Have you attempted to bring charges against those people who shot your boyfriend? Have you done anything with the police department, with the prosecutor's office that you have not done with the police department after you did not receive any satisfaction? And what were their response?
Okay, well, let's see. Let me start with the fact that 2 days after Jay was shot and killed, that I was chased down by 200 police officers on the freeway. They put me in jail and tried to bring me federal or felony charges, but 2 years after...
Wait, 200?
Yes.
200?
Every single one of those cops that I was driving from Jay's house, I had put flowers and I had put candles, and about 5 hours prior to this, I had gone to the house to go get funeral clothes, and the people who had caused the situation with Jay when the day that he was killed came home and saw us and called a police officer, the black police officer, Officer Holloway, who had called the police on Jay that day that he was killed. He wrote out, he and a detective, Mike Fox, wrote out a fake warrant for my arrest and also a warrant for my son's arrest. So I was subsequently, after I had left the flowers at Jay's front door, I was driving home with my 2 little babies in the car and stopped on the freeway, and all I could see was a sea of officers after I got out of my car because it was felony arrest. They all had got rifles pointed at my head. I thought I was going to be killed.
What were the charges that could bring out 200 police officers?
They said that assault on a witness or conspiracy on a witness, and they were calling the people across the street witnesses to Jay's murder or something like that. They were all fake charges. They were subsequently no prosecuted because it was a fake warrant. They never should have arrested me. They were trying to arrest me because I had been on the news and they saw that there was actually a smart person that was involved in Jay's family and that I was going to speak out. It's as simple as that. I was on the news. The news was there. I talked to the news. It was all over the news stations. I was talking about APD and how they are a gang. They did not like that. I spoke to Mike Fox that day when I went to get the funeral clothes. I said, I have a tape on my phone of Jay in the house before he was killed. I said, I'm too sick. I'm not going to go over there. So they were trying to listen to my phone after they had arrested me. They took my phone away. But they tried to give me felony charges. I kid you not. They wanted to mess up my life. And they really tried really hard because I had charges not only for my son. My son was arrested on the same charges, myself, and then they tried to bring back charges about... They sent me a CYFD letter because there was a CYFD lady there that said that my daughter was being abused because she was in the house when Jay was killed, that Jay abused her because she was in the house when he was killed. I kid you not. I was sent a $15,000 bill from the UNM hospital because Jay was killed. They were trying to make me pay for the ambulance costs and the hospital costs.
Wow. So did you have a conversation then with the district attorney's office in regard to these felony charges?
Hell no. I went and my mother...
Did you have a lawyer?
My mother paid Brad Hall, who's one of the top civil rights lawyers here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Brad Hall actually went into the house after Jay was shot and killed with Judge Jewell. Judge Jewell was a friend of Jay. They went into the house after Jay was killed. Brad Hall told me that was a bad shooting. My mother paid him $5,000 in order for me not to have these felony charges. And I paid money to my son's lawyer, of which my son did an Alford plea and was put on probation for 8 years for the same charges that I had, which were no prosecuted. If you go and I got a job, my boss said my background check is like 5 inches high because it's got all the dang information in there. They try to mess up my life. So, but anyway, 2 years later after Jay was killed, before the 2-year cutoff, I did put in a lawsuit, and due to the corruption in this town, I had to represent myself for about a couple of months while I took my box of stuff all around to all the lawyers in this town, including the Kennedys, including the ACLU, all the lawyers who want to come out now after the 2010 thing and say that they want to fight police brutality, who did nothing to help me back in 2010. The only one that helped me was James Lyle, and I wish I had had him from the very beginning, because he flew to Denver and went in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. They told me because I went after the wrong cop that they were going to side with Judge Browning, who let Russell Carter get off not once, but twice, because there was another person that brought a lawsuit regarding Russell Carter, who shot somebody else. I think he did 3 shootings in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that he got away with till they put him in a different spot. But
okay, hold fire. Dinah is absolutely desperate to get in here. Dinah, are you there?
Yes, I am. I just wanted to comment on just a couple of things. You had mentioned that the DA, if we had attempted to reach out to our district attorney, who it's important to know, she has been in office for well over 13 years. She's a Democrat. Her name is Carrie Brandenburg of the Second Judicial District Court here in Albuquerque. She is equally, extremely corrupt. There is not a single officer that she has indicted, except with the exception of James Boyd's killers. And so she has justified every single shooting. And after she was going to indict Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez, who killed Abba Boyd up on the mountain, the police retaliated against her. So they brought up charges on her from over a year ago concerning Carrie Brandenburg trying to bribe some citizen to which her son had broken into their house or something. So Carrie Brandenburg came out publicly and said that she was afraid of the Albuquerque Police Department. And the only newspaper that even reported on it was the Albuquerque Free Press, which is not our newspaper. It's sort of just this not a, independent. Yeah, it's definitely it's independent. And it wasn't 3 days later that the Albuquerque Journal, who is the largest newspaper in like the state of New Mexico, then reported on it. So even our newspaper and our media, they twist everything. They're all part of this huge problem. They act as if they don't live in this city and they're not vested in it. And so that's a problem too, because even if we go to them, then media spins it like, oh, well, he had a gun or he had this long, horrible list of all these bad things they've done their whole life. And Jay Murphy, Teresa's boyfriend and father of her kids, he worked at West Mesa during the time that I went to high school there. And he was a decent human being. He was fair. And I wasn't always like, on the honor roll, I guess, if you will. I got kicked out of one school because I was trying to organize a walkout. But aside from that, Jay was always fair, even to, the worst of students to the best of students. He was a good person. He had, I guess what I call like life's complications. Like shit happens in people's lives and we find ourselves doing things to try and survive, whether it's drugs or whatever manifests from it. And the when Jay was killed, they justified that shooting by Teresa's children, by their children together, that they shot Jay in order to save the children. And like that's just some shit you can't. That has to be hard to live with. Period. They executed him. They killed him. He had 2 bullets in his face, like in his head, in front of her children.
Here's the thing. 1 second. Here's the thing, right? Those children are going to be left to grow up with the words ringing, as far as the police was concerned, right, that they killed their father in order to protect and save them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Imagine the trauma You can't imagine the trauma that those children must be going through. David, when they're fighting through such a corrupt system, what's the best angle? What angle should they be taking?
I think that Ilsa makes a point that you have to have patience, but like Dr. King said in the Birmingham City Jail, if not now, when? And how long do we have to be patient to demand our freedom? You know, the Constitution of the United States of America begins with to ordain a system with justice. The very first thing is justice. And the Declaration of Independence ends in our first preamble with the right to the life of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness. And then the Constitution says justice. And happiness and justice go together. You cannot be happy nor maintain a meaningful life in a town or a city where the police are militarized, where the prosecutor is corrupt, where the journalists side with the power brokers, and there is no justice. There can be no happiness because there can be no security. And I want to get into it with Steve in the second part of the show about this gentrification, the building, the housing projects.
We're going to do that very shortly. Very shortly.
But the answer to me, the deal with Teresa is, it seems that to be persistent is one thing. To be patient is a far different thing. Can one be patient when one's fundamental human rights are on the line? What does patience mean? Right.
Just one other thing before. I'm not sure how much longer we've got, Teresa, for. But have the children themselves ever questioned the role in the death of their father?
Yes.
And what do you have to tell them? How do you get them through that?
Well, just because, yes, when the newspaper came out and they said that in this quote-unquote hostage situation, calling my daughter a hostage, and they try to spread that around and say that was the reasoning, and then I feel like that both, yes, my kids kind of questioned that, and I said, no, there are other reasons. It is not, they knew that it was bull crap.
Okay.
They knew, I guess. I mean, but yeah, that was wrong to kind of put that on their heads and try to say that. Wow. My daughter did her best to try to save her dad, meaning telling the police officers, no, I'm not coming outside because you're going to hurt my dad. So.
Steve.
Yes.
Is this as low as the police have gone in your experience?
No. I don't believe it is. I mean, it's low, and it's not to at all, make light of Teresa's situation. It's rather to highlight exactly how far we've fallen, I guess. No, it's not at all as low as they've gone.
Just share with us another experience that you may know of where the police have actually stooped so low as to justify their actions of murder or ill treatment.
Well, I mean, are you looking for another example of?
Yeah, just any example. Just so our listeners, especially those that are over on this side of the water, can get an understanding to the depth of corruption we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, I hate to keep bringing up the Boyd incident, but it is the most well known for Albuquerque, and again, this goes back to sort of what we were talking about earlier with IPRA and following these paths, and this is to sort of highlight how bankrupt our institutions actually are. When Albuquerque Police Department released that video of the James Boyd shooting, they did so thinking that it supported their position that was a justified shooting. And, here was a guy, we've all seen the video. It's very clear he didn't pose a threat. It's very clear he was turning when he was shot, because he was actually shot in his lower left back. I mean, there's just a whole slew. You could pick through the 30 cases we've had since just 2010 and find, well over half of them reach the level of, sort of sheer incompetence that was displayed in Teresa's case. And so it's hard. I mean, I don't want to really highlight any because they're all sort of, not good shootings. The Mary Hawk shooting is a really another good example, and it's also been left behind, much like Teresa's case in the news. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but the girl was 19 years old, had suffered, some problems of being homeless and drug issues and these things. And Jeremy Deere shot her with no lapel video, produced a drop gun that, supposedly belonged to her. However, when the media was there, they took pictures. There was no gun. Later, there was a gun in the same picture. And then, when asked by the media, like, hey, sorry, guys, but what happened to the gun? The response was that they moved it for officer safety. So I'll just break that down so we're clear on what they're saying. They're saying that they arrived at a scene and there was a gun laying on the ground, and they picked it up from one spot and moved it to another, which was another dirt pound, and then took its photo. We all know that that's not protocol for the police. They don't move the so-called weapon that the victim had, and they certainly don't move it for safety until their investigation's done. And when they do remove it, they remove it from the field and book it into evidence. They don't pick it up from one spot in a public street and set it down in another. And to this day, the actual gun has never been produced. So that's just another one. And then, nothing's ever happened with the Mary Hawks case. Her family, thankfully, has started to pursue some legal avenues against the city, and I was really glad to see that. But it's really hard to pick any case because they're all quite bad. I mean,
what makes Albuquerque stand out as to any other city that's going through police brutality and corrupt policing? What makes Albuquerque stand out so much?
The volume. The volume up until, the major protests citywide through a lot of community and a lot of organizations, up until that really got heated, that would have been in March of what, 12? And so in March of 12.
No, it was 13.
Oh, sorry, Teresa. The March of 13. See, they've stopped killing people. What are we at, 3 this year? So they've shot 3 people this year, and prior to the city and the DOJ and the whole thing getting really heated, we had one of the highest levels per capita of shooting across the nation. They were killing someone every basically 6 to 8 weeks up until the time we all stood up as community. And they continue to maintain that there's not a problem, but it does beg the question, if there wasn't a problem, then why did you guys stop killing people? Because in large part they have. I mean, they still do kill people, but not with the frequency they had. And then if you take that farther to highlight Albuquerque, away from other cities, our history of police brutality goes back well beyond 2010. We had the big, what they call them, the Roosevelt riots, I guess, in the 70s that was about police brutality. We had the Lunar Walker report. We have this sort of long history of violence towards our citizens coming from the police department. And in large part, my personal take is that we have a tendency to put purely incompetent people into powerful and elected positions in this state. And you're seeing that now with the fallout of the daily news. I mean, like, everyone we have in a major position of power has proven time and time and time again to merely be incompetent. And that's what I think. I don't know that we are unique. I mean, the whole nation's suffering from this brutality issue. But the sheer volume that we had, I mean, we were at what? Twice the rate of New York. No, I'm sorry. We were twice the rate of New York and 8 times the rate of Chicago killings here in Albuquerque, right up until, that all happened in 13.
Has there been a high number of shootings of by civilians on police?
No. I mean, that's a national trend you're seeing in the media.
I got to ask the question.
But I want to provide a little data. Like, this year, we're currently on track to be the second safest year for police officers in the history of the institution. And if you look at the data that supports that claim, you'll realize that the most violent times towards police in this nation was during Prohibition. And it's really only gone down and down every single year since Prohibition ended. And like I'm asking
the question for a particular reason. and the particular reason is this, then where does the line "I was in fear for my life" bear relevance?
It gains relevance in the court because that's what they're
absolutely. But the point being, what I'm saying is to Joe Public, right? If you're telling me and you're telling us that the amount of attacks by civilians on police are either minimal or non-existent, then the police cannot be allowed to get away with, but I was in fear with my life, because there is no relevant fear for their life if there is no record or measure of attacks against them that force them to feel this way.
I'm going to let Ilsa take that.
Go in there, Elsa.
I would like to just, it's a sort of a sideways answer, but I think it gets to the point. There are a couple of Facebook memes going around because the cops also tend to nationally start killing dogs because they fear for their lives, because they're such scaredy cats. And then there are the points being made that pizza delivery people and post-delivery people and so on also have interactions with dogs, and they do not kill the dogs. I feel that's a complete crock of an excuse.
Absolutely, I'm with you 100%.
For the police officers to say, I feared for my life, and then that becomes a blanket excuse. I do not accept that.
Even when you look at the James Boyd incident, I mean, that wasn't just a murder, that was an execution. And at no way, in any of that video footage, would you deem him to be threatening, approaching aggressively, or being a likely threat to any of them. And yet they've tried to justify that with that they were in fear for their life, that this guy posed a threat. How do we get into the law courts, the places where it's going to matter to turn around a decision-making process that keeps defending the police?
I personally think that we get there by we keep bringing the cases to the court, so that the court, hopefully, like they did with the Boyd case, I mean, that's currently has been deemed sufficient to go to trial, so it is going to move to trial. There's no easy answer to that other than to keep presenting the case, keep presenting the facts, and keep challenging what they're saying, because they're taught to say that. The courts for years, decades, in fact, have relied on it. And to Ilsa's point, it's not just, others, it's the EMTs, it's the other first responders. None of them have that sort of privilege to say they feared for their lives. So I think beyond, it goes back to that policy issue, like we're going to have to start moving into policy and training areas through state legislatures. But primarily we're going to have to keep taking it to the courts and keep having the judges say no to, I feared for my life. I can clearly see the video. I mean, there's cases right now, active in the public where that's being said, and it's clearly not the case. And I just want to say regarding Boyd specifically, I don't want to make light of the police's job, because they do encounter some pretty radical individuals occasionally, but unfortunately they're not trained to recognize when something's very serious and when it's not. Like, I've always felt like you could have picked two random people off the street and sent them up there to talk to Boyd and have him walk down the hill. It's a matter of how you approach people. Yeah. And unfortunately, the police are constantly taught to approach with the stick before the carrot. And then when they say they feared for their lives, well, it's very easy to juxtapose them to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, who is, operating in largely the same territory as the APD, and yet they're not killing people with near the frequency. So what's the difference there? Like, why does that exist? So every argument they have can be logically, argued against, because there you have an example right there. And honestly, the county continues to provide an example in many cases, including IPRA challenges, et cetera, where they just excel and the city fails. And this goes to, picking up dogs off the street. Why can the county function and the city cannot? It's just like they're saying now with our 10-day rule they have about, proceeding with court cases. Well, Bernalillo County had that rule placed on them because they were failing in letting people linger in jail. None of the other jurisdictions in the state were having that problem. Now now the city of Albuquerque wants to change the law to accommodate their ineptness. And I keep pointing to all the other surrounding jurisdictions and say, well, why don't they have a problem? Why does the problem only lie with APD? So therefore, it's not structural, it's institutional. Our department's failing because it has really poor leadership that remains the same folks that have been with us all through the DOJ, all through, APD's sort of downward spiral. They're all still there. They're defended by the city administration. In fact, they're given raises and bonuses so that your local beat cop has to sit there and watch his boss that caused the whole mess get a raise while they were denied theirs. That's the problem, is we have embedded sort of administration that looks after themselves. And I call it, it's the failure of the ruling incompetence, because that's what we have here.
David.
Yes.
Expert on prosecutorial misconduct. How best would you go after this situation in Albuquerque?
I'm not there, but it seems to me that until the people of Albuquerque decide themselves that they want to change and do not want a reputation of people in uniform running around shooting innocent people who they then say they were afraid of, nothing is going to change. The people must come together. Ilsa has a strong voice. Stephen certainly seems to be focused in the right direction. But sometimes I think it is imperative to awaken the quiet masses, the silent majority. I hate to use that Nixonian phrase, but the silent majority who are in their living rooms watching stupid shows on TV until they feel threatened, until their own children are threatened, until the victims are no longer blacks and poor and Hispanic people. Nothing is going to change because they control the power. And how that happens, I don't know. But I do know that until the civil rights movement formed the core and began to get on buses and ride down to the South and show on national television the horrendous crimes of Jim Crow and segregation, enforce the issue, nothing happened. Every time there's a police shooting, I'm not an activist. I'm an Army man. I was trained differently. But were I an activist, and I could be one, I would get together a group of 500 or 1,000 people on Twitter through mass media. I don't care if they're from Albuquerque or from the Cathedral Caverns. I don't care where they're from. And when there's a police shooting, I would surround that police station with 500 people, and that would get massive coverage. And I would say, don't destroy evidence. They're destroying evidence. Whether they're destroying evidence or not, the fact is they have in the past. They've hidden it in the past. They've lied in the past. They pull up in Chicago and shoot a man 16 times and justify it. Pull it out. Pull out all the forces. Accuse them of every imaginable thing they can do before they even think of doing it. And I guarantee you, you will eventually have a change in the police management, in the mayor, in the city council, and you would force it. And if one city did it, another city, and it would continue. And every time I heard that some foreign police, whether it's a Japanese, German, or Israeli, or Turkish or Russian, are training American police forces, I would demand a refusal to pay taxes until those funds quit going to paying foreign military forces, training our police officers to shoot us dead like we're some Palestinian with no rights. That's what I would begin with. I would elevate the cost of their misbehavior. I would elevate and make the cost so prohibitive that the democracy itself would collapse under our protest.
Wow. Well, Ilsa.
And forgive me if in any way I appear to be criticizing the magnificent and brave work you people are doing. It's just that sometimes you've got to elevate it. Apartheid did not end because people sat down and talked to each other. It ended because the ANC, and I'm sorry about Mrs. Mandela, and she went overboard maybe a little bit with all that tire necking and stuff, but it seems to me you've got to elevate it with massive strikes. What would happen if the entire Hispanic and black community of Albuquerque quit buying things like the blacks did in Montgomery in 1959 and 60? If you just quit buying things, just say, no, we're going out to the white suburbs where we're not harassed, and we're going to buy from them, and flood their stores with black people. They'll get it. Flood their stores with Hispanic people. Flood them. And quit buying in the inner city, and see what then happens to the city of Albuquerque.
Ilse, come in.
Well, actually, Dinah wants to say something.
Come on, Dinah.
You know, a lot of those things, it's not like that hasn't crossed our mind or we haven't done it. I mean, we have literally taken over our city council. Many people, including Ilse, have gone to jail in complete protest of the system, of our government. But these things that you speak of, it's not like people by the masses are not thinking of it here. Albuquerque has about 500,000 people, and there's not really like the suburbs, you know. Albuquerque is just sort of Albuquerque, right? And so we are lacking a boycott. That's something that we do need to pursue. I don't know who that is or what that is, but that does need to come. But in Albuquerque, specifically Albuquerque, but New Mexico in general, we suffer from extreme poverty, and even below the national ranking where people are typically poor. I mean, we have far exceeded that. So being poor is highly exhausting. So people can barely manage to like get through their day, right? Because being poor takes a lot of energy. Everything takes so much more. And so you're getting off of work, you're trying to get the kids sorted, you got dinner going, you got homework, you got bath, and boom, bed, only to do it again tomorrow. And then there's also this loyalty component. We have like a tricultural state here. So not only do we have like the Hispanos, but we also have the Anglos, and we also have the Native Americans, okay? And so so our state is just historically oppressed, and those who like have the same color of skin as us, those who look like us, same last names, they all got into power. And so we think by having Susana Martinez, right, the first Latina governor of the state of New Mexico, historically, she is the first Latina governor in the nation. But she's not really Latina as much as she is Mexican, right? But she hates Mexicans. She's always trying to like have them go back to the border and like get IDs, or we're not going to give them IDs or something. But that's just another ploy so that we can hate the Mexican, right? And because we border so close to Mexico, well, actually we border Mexico, and nobody considers us a border town, but we are a border town, right? And so we have all these different components leading into why we're not quite doing things. But if you do speak out, they gonna come get you. And most likely they are, well, not most likely, they are gonna win. They're gonna win. So either they're gonna beat you down to where you have absolutely nothing, or they're gonna kill you. That is the reality here, period. And that price is often too high to pay for, well, for most people. And so, but it is a price that is necessary, and it's getting to the people and saying, look, just because they look like us don't mean they represent us, because they don't. They are part of the problem. And then they have us believing that homeless people is not the same as being poor, right? So then the working poor sort of looks at the homeless as if like, well, they just repeat what the government and media say. They say, well, they're bums. Pull yourself up from your own bootstraps. Well, that's all easy, asshole, but I don't got no fucking boots. So what do you want me to do? Pull myself up from my socks or what? So see, there's all these different components, but they make us hate each other. And so we need to start looking at those lines and defining them differently, because they are the poor, and they are coming for us next, the working poor. And after that, they're going after the unions. And after that, man, we're going to leave generations to be fighting wars that we have already won.
Wow.
Yeah, yes, but it seems to me that at some point you have nothing else to lose. And freedom comes at the price of blood sometimes. And I know no one wants to die.
No, I get it.
But watch this. 1 second. Dinah, David, 1 second. I hear what you're saying as well, David, but I think in the reality is this. As an activist, individually, as a group, you can make request upon request upon request. You're just the same ones doing the requests each and every time. It needs a mass gathering from everybody involved. And all the peoples throughout that city, that town, to be making the request for public. I had the conversation with Andy Christopherson last week, and we've had the very same conversation with Charlie Gratzby. It's going to take the masses to be putting in those requests, to be putting the pressure on local authorities to make the changes that need to be made. Because to just put it down onto a particular activist or a group of activists or one activist or that particular activist group is a very unfair place. And a very unfair statement, because the activists are the only ones that are actually keeping these issues alive.
Steve, let me ask you, what are you doing to ensure in these housing areas that you are helping to develop and that exist already, that police do not use unnecessary force or force that is not consistent with force that they would use in upper income bracket neighborhoods?
Hey, that's a really great question, and I'll answer it. But before we leave this point that we're talking about, you mentioned something, and Kervin did, that I think should be highlighted, because we're all talking about, I'm here simply because I got outraged, and then at some point the cost of the work that I do became, okay to me. So it is a cost benefit, and everybody runs it. And we are sort of, waiting on the masses. And this is true of any movement throughout a history. And people do have, I often ask, well, what is the threshold for our tolerance? Because mine has been exceeded a long time ago. But then I realize I'm an individual with my own, support structure, with my own life, with my own way of doing things, and other people have theirs, and some people have more constraints on them. And I'm very optimistic because we have in the past risen as, en masse, so to speak. And I'm optimistic that we will do that when the time is right, because of the things you said earlier, David, about, everybody's at home watching TV, reading nonsense, going to the movies. And it's because it hasn't gotten to their life enough for them to be willing to pay the cost that Dinah spoke of. Because historically, the cost for change has been very high for the individuals that help to get it moving along. That's true today as it has been historically. There will be a price to pay here. I believe that the people are willing to pay it. I believe there are people willing to pay it now. I believe there are people that are willing to pay it that will come later. It's just, in a way, we're waiting on the people. I think the work of all activists and advocates across the nation and across the globe is to do what Kervin just said. Keep these issues in the forefront. Keep them on people's minds until such time that the people themselves en masse feel the need to flood their streets, because they will. And they have. So I just want to highlight, we call it la lucha and then say siempre. And that's the struggle, and siempre is always. And that's what resistance means. It's always. It's every day. It's all day. And there is no ultimate victory. It's simply resistance. Resistance exists as its own thing. Resistance doesn't necessarily lead you to a goal, a victory, a solution. It's merely there to resist the oppression that we're having until we do reach that critical mass. So I believe that the struggle is always forever, and that you're born into it, your kids will be born into it, and that we have to resist it throughout all of time, because that's what we've been shown historically. We have to stand always. There's no break, there's no rest, and there is a big price to pay. But the people that have come before us have paid that price. And there's those of us now that are willing to pay that price, and more coming. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think it's very important for all activists to sort of have it in their mind. We're working, and there may not be a victory every single day or maybe every year. Maybe, they're few and far in between. But you have to be there doing it. Because to this day, water still remains the most efficient way to cut through stone. And it's what Ilsa said earlier. It's persistence. And you have to persistently dog them for transparency and accountability and to do their job that we place them there to do. Now, getting to the homes and the affordable housing aspect of things and how to keep the police, from sort of overstepping their lines, I don't know yet. We're working on that. We've had some conversation with the police here in town. My actual gut feeling is that the police actually support micro-home communities, tent encampments, these things when they're run properly, because it does keep people from being out in the street. I mean, here's the thing. If you're not allowed to go anywhere and you don't have a home and you're out wandering the street all day, well, technically you're loitering most of the day. And then we've created ordinances, which I want to highlight are not law, they're ordinances, that say, you can't stop, you can't rest, you can't do this. If the bus passes you when you're at the bus stop, you're going to get a ticket for loitering. And what we're saying is if we create a space for people to be and exist, we're already minimizing their contact with the police because we're decriminalizing their existence. And I think that's how the communities can help with the relationship between the police and the non-housed, is simply decriminalizing the fact that they're breathing air.
We had a significant homeless problem here in the UK, and down in Westminster in particular, where they decided that because that's where the Houses of Parliament are and that's where aristocracy is and that's where all the rich people live, they were going to try and put out a law where it was against the law, illegal for a homeless person to sleep in a shop doorway or in sheltered any kind of shelter in the city. In other words, they can come out to my community, they can go out to your community, and they can go out to someone else's community, and they can go and sleep anywhere they want. But they're not going to be allowed to sleep in this particular area because that's where these people were. And a massive uproar and outrage went out. And if you go into the centre of London now, you'll find people sleeping anywhere where they can. But the bottom line is this. What right do the authorities have to treat someone who is without home any differently than how they would treat an ordinary citizen? Because someone without home is just an ordinary citizen without home. It's still somebody else's son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, auntie, cousin, friend. It's still an individual, a human being that for whatever reason has fallen on hard times, bad luck, loss of job. And I did a big seminar with Barclays about 3 or 4 years ago, probably a bit longer than that, and we talked about the 3 steps to homelessness, which started off with family breakdown, and 90% of homelessness starts with a family breakdown, a relationship breakdown. Before loss of job, loss of house, and everything else. And contrary to what people believe, most homeless people don't start off by being drug addicts or alcoholics. This just becomes a coping mechanism that they fall into in order to cool the pain, hide the pain, mask the pain once they're living a homeless or life. So how is it that the homeless in America are treated with such discussed by most when they are just ordinary people without home?
Kerwin, there's a very interesting theorist called Wjgr, and he makes a wonderful point that if you see an unhoused person, that person starts threatening your own paradigms. So in a sense, they're shifting it, they're becoming threatening because you realize your own mortality, your own vulnerability, and people feel uncomfortable with that. And if you look at how people are arguing why people should not be in their backyards, anywhere else, but not in my backyard, it's frequently classed as a quality of life argument. So in other words, if you have an unhoused person sleeping in a shop doorway, it's bad for business. If you have someone needing to pee or poo in your backyard because they don't have any other way to just do a normal human function, then it impinges on your quality of life. And it's sort of this quality of life that becomes only given to the taxpayers, only given to the housed people. It's no longer a universal quality of life. So there are the entire urban structure is designed in such a way to disperse people who do not have their own place, their own private property. Because they don't have their own private property, if they want to have a drink, as many people do, then they have to do that in public, and then immediately they are in violation of some ordinance or another. We've also found especially in the tent cities that we've run, that the people living in the tent cities were required to be model citizens. They were not allowed to have any aberration of any of the ordinances. Yet that same standard was not applied to people who did have homes to go to, houses to go to. So there is this discrimination, and part of the discrimination is to make sure that I'm secure, that I'm okay. And the only way I can be okay is to make that distinction between myself, who does have a house, to someone who does not have that same privilege.
You know, I've had drug addicts and alcoholics. I've brought them into my home to eat, to sleep. I've had 3 drug addicts do their cold turkey in my house. It's an area that I'm absolutely passionate about, partly because I lived a very similar lifestyle myself. I was once upon a time a drug addict, and once upon a time I was also homeless. So I know what these lifestyles are. I'm not like that anymore, and life has changed. But I know what it is to be that. But you know, in working with homeless people and drug addicts and alcohol dependents, when you hear their heart, when you hear how much they would rather not live like this, it's heartbreaking. And to have them treated with such disrespect and lack of consideration for everything that they've actually been through and where they are, and the fact that they're still alive to battle on and try and further their lives. I cannot see how this shakes our paradigms. The bottom line is there, but for the grace of God we go. And any one of us, every single one of us, by grace, are only 3 steps away from where this homeless guy is at the end of your street. You know,
can I, Kervin? You have such a wonderful heart. I'm always honored to be with you because your feelings are so expressive, and I can only wish that I could be as expressive. But maybe I don't feel as deeply as you. But I would like to address something I find that I would like because we're getting near the end of the show, all of our guests to address. One is, you know, as a Jew, I know there are about 100 organizations in America, from AIPAC to J Street. The minute you say something about a Jew, you've got 50 people down your throat, your career is over, and you might as well just roll up your carpet and move to Tahiti. I wonder, why is there no such group or many groups doing the same for the poor people, Hispanics and blacks and other minorities in our community? That's number one. Number two, I would like to ask, how is it that we who are not in those groups, the white American, the Catholic, the Jew, the people, the European, the Asian, who are fortunate not to be in those circumstances, how can we get involved? What groups are there that we can contribute to, either financially or otherwise? Why isn't there is it a possibility, or are there organizations? I mean, I know we have Black Lives Matter, but there are a lot of people who feel that's exclusive, and it doesn't include other minorities, women, homosexual, gay people, lesbians, Hispanics who should be included. All lives matter, Black Lives Matter. I get that. But So the two questions I have is, how is it possible that such organizations that don't rapidly jump like a jet fighter to defend the dignity of those humans doesn't exist? And two, are there organizations that we can contribute to and that we can help make more visible and stronger in the defense?
David, I would like to just turn that around, turn it on its side a little bit. I think it's actually more important, and in fact it's crucial, that every human being on this dear earth starts thinking about what can I do personally,
Absolutely.
as opposed to wanting to jump onto what organizations are already existing. The organizations are important and the organizations exist. But if you're in any case going to have the personal attitude of saying, I want to make a difference, I want to do something, I can guarantee you that you'll find something that you can do. And then you'll also find the organizations that already exist.
You know, here's a problem. Sorry, I have to agree with you, Ilse. The bottom line is, when I started off my homeless charity 10 years ago, I didn't go looking. We started off, and I'll quickly tell you, I was at a church. They brought a guy who they'd found on the street, and we took him to Kentucky, and we gave him a meal. He was desperate. He was unshaven. He was dirty. He was hungry. So we took him to Kentucky, and we bought him a meal. Just asked him if there was any more like him. He said yes. I said, well, bring your mate next week, and we'll do it. And we took two of them the following week, and we asked, was there any more? And they said yes, there was many more. So then I came home, I went to a shop, I bought a few flasks, I went down to my local supermarket, I bought some loaves of bread, I made about 4 or 5 loaves of bread worth of sandwiches, 3 or 4 flasks of soup, coffee and tea, and I walked into town, and I thought, I'm going to go and walk around, and when I find them, I'm just going to give them some food. And I did that for 2 to 3 weeks. And then I said, look, there's a place in town where I will be every Sunday at this time, bring your friends and we'll feed you. My charity has now been running for 10 years and is probably the biggest soup kitchen in the UK now. And we feed over 350 people every week. We now also go into the homes of people that are living on low income and single parents who are struggling. And we support them with furniture when they get into their first homes. And we have a network of people that now contribute towards what we can do. And in the midst of all of that, I then found out that there were other organizations that were helping the homeless. And what you tend to find is that other groups don't like other groups stepping on their toes. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls that you have in trying to accomplish something in any city, is most people are not prepared to work with another group that's doing the same thing as them. And I turned that around on its head. I made a front page headline requesting that we all work together, because I now had the publicity on my side. I had already got the Pride of Coventry Local Hero Award. I'd featured on the Secret Millionaire. BBC and ITV had documented various things that I was doing. I had videos up there on YouTube and all the rest of it. So I now had the attention. And rather than just keeping it to myself, I actually opened the door and partnered with them and got a lot of other groups involved. And I think that is the way forward for organized groups, activists were working for the same cause, to be partnering with each other instead of competing with each other. And that way we probably might be able to get a hell of a lot more accomplished.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
Sure. I'm sorry to interrupt. What I'm thinking is I'm wondering where all the families are of these folks that are homeless. And the reason why I say that is my number one thing right now. If my children are struggling, I try to ensure that they're given the things that they need. And it absolutely breaks my heart when I see teenagers out on the streets. I'm wondering, where are their parents? We have to be responsible for all of our family members and help them to the best of our ability, and not just let them fall, is what I think. And I think that if there are a lot other people out there who are not just letting other people have to take care of their family member, helping and taking that there would be less of the homelessness going on, or less of the poverty.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion.
We've got about 6 minutes left. I want to try and give everybody a couple of minutes just to round up on anything that they might want to say or that they haven't had a chance of saying yet. Dina, do you want to just come in very quickly and just round up whatever you want to put in here? I think there's going to need to be a third show on this. I'm not satisfied, but we'll try and book in another date. But Dina, can you come in?
Yeah, we probably need a whole month just to break it down. Just kidding.
It is a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I think it is important that all groups and all people come together. You don't need to be part of a group to, know what the hell's going on in your own city. And in New Mexico, 2016, one of our goals is to unite all struggles because they all lead back to corrupt government. And we have a waterfall at Civic Plaza, and we're going to stop that fall until that water rains of justice and liberty and life and the pursuit of happiness. And we're going to fire them all in the end, I hope, or at least die trying. At least I will.
Hi. Ilsa, do you want to round up what you want to say?
I want to pick up something that Teresa now just mentioned. And yes, Teresa, you're right. It would be great in an ideal world for the families to be able to step in. But we worked with a very young guy who was living in one of the 10 cities that we helped to organize. And we were looking at him and trying to think, what can we do? How did it come to this? Where is his family, etc.? And then we started to realize that not only did the system fail this particular guy, but the system had also failed his parents, and presumably also even his grandparents.
Wow.
So it becomes like a whole generational fall, and that's no excuse. That's just a realization that at some point or another we need to start turning that wheel around so that the next generation or 2 generations from now might not again just be on that same trajectory. We've got to start changing the direction in which we're moving.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's fair to carte blanche say, where are the families? Because we don't know what the situations of those families are. But I do believe the chances are that the system had failed them as well.
Absolutely. We're going to have to push you very quickly. I've got 3 minutes left. Steve, round up before we bring in Dave to finish off.
Yeah, I'll just go very quickly. And I just want to add to what Teresa just said, because I often ask myself, if there's a young child on the corner, say 12, 13, 14, 15, that child doesn't sit there long before the community's trying to reach out and figure out what's going on. And I often ask myself, well, from 15 or 16 to the year 20, what other possibilities came into that individual's lives? What choices was he supposed to make in those 5 years? What's the difference? What's the difference between a 22-year-old sitting on the street with no food and nowhere to live and a 15-year-old? Why do we have compassion for one and not the other? And that's because of the expectations that we were all talking about earlier. And here's the bottom line is that in this country, as a whole, in mass, and as individuals, we do not like to admit and see failure. And the reality is that's one of the largest contributing causes to the non-housed chronic conditions that we face today, is that inability to say this is a failure and we need to correct it. That's why they didn't like the tent cities. That's why they don't like the homeless. You can be homeless if you're a shadow. If you hide, nobody bothers you. If you don't set up a camp, no one bothers you. It's when we're forced to look at it and address it that it becomes a problem, because it reflects failure back upon us. And for some reason, we don't accept that as part of life. We just accept that as this thing that we're not going to accept at all. And I'm saying failure is part of living. And if we're going to improve things, we have to acknowledge it and see it and move along. And I'll just wrap it, I guess.
David, we've got less than 1 minute before I hand over to the next presenter. So
I want to thank Ilsa, Diana, Teresa, and Steve for being here. I also will stress again, not to beat a dead horse, but until we hold the state's attorneys and prosecutors accountable for the illegal activity, whether from the people or from police in our communities, and the lawyers responsible for covering up these crimes, until we force the public records to be open,
10 seconds.
until we hold them accountable, there will be no change.
I agree with you. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid, friends. That's Issues Today for tonight. We look forward to seeing you again. Don't forget, there's no Issues Today next week. We'll be back on the 2nd of January with another show. Thank you all very much. We're out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Love you, Teresa.
I love you too, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.